Good Tuesday evening, everyone. A special edition of the Carolinas Weather Group. We normally do this thing on Wednesday nights, but we're kind of switching the schedule up just a little bit tonight. So welcome to a Tuesday night edition of the Carolinas Weather Group. As, of course, I'm host Scotty Powell, along with Kit Collinger tonight. A lot of our guys are off on vacations and trying to get settled into college, so kind of a small panel tonight. But nonetheless, we're here and ready to talk to our guest, Mr. Larry Cosgrove, who will be talking a little bit about El Nino. That's been the big story here in the past couple of weeks of this Godzilla El Nino, and I've heard all kinds of comparisons. So we're going to get the nitty-gritty tonight with Mr. Larry, and he's going to kind of tell us all about El Nino and La Nina and its effects on us and what he thinks is going to happen over the next several months. But before we do that, kind of housekeeping rules. This is a live broadcast, so we do have a question and answers section on the tab there. So if you have a question, feel free to shoot it to us, and we'll give it to our guests. You can also ask those via Twitter and Facebook. We'll be monitoring those. And if you're listening to us on the podcast and you want to ask a question, feel free to shoot us that question on Twitter. Or you can have Larry's Twitter here at the end of the show and direct those questions towards him. So I think that's about got it. I am going to kick it over to Kit. We have some developing news today on the weather front. We have a new tropical system to be tracking in the Atlantic. So we're going to kick it over to Kit. He's going to kind of give you the rundown of that, and then we're going to discuss that before we get into the El Nino talk. Kit?
All right, thank you, Scotty. Well, right now we have Tropical Storm Danny. We're on the D now for our list of tropical storms and hurricanes this season. As of 4 o'clock Eastern time today, the National Hurricane Center classified it as a tropical storm with maximum wind speeds of 40 miles per hour. If you want to try and envision where it is, it's not anywhere close right now. It's about midway between the coast of Africa and the far east side of the Caribbean. Most of the model tracks have it going pretty much straight towards the Lesser Antilles and Puerto Rico. I've seen one that has it fizzling out, but this early in its development, it's kind of tough to see how much it will affect North America. So we'll keep an eye on it, and I'll toss it on back to Scotty now.
Thank you, Kit. And we're getting ready to talk about Danny here with Mr. Larry Cosgrove. He is our guest tonight. Larry is a meteorologist for some energy companies as well as runs the website weatheramerica.net. So, Larry, we're very appreciative of you coming on tonight and giving us a little bit of your time. And
thank you, Scotty.
We look forward to talking about all sorts of things here in the weather world. But let's, first of all, kind of get your background, and then we'll talk a little bit about Danny before we head into the El Nino talk.
Okay. First of all, I am really an old person now because I've got about, what I count, 39 years professional experience after school at the University of Kansas. And most of my career, 29 years worth, was in TV and radio. And I found that when TV started to slow to a trickle, I had to do something else, and I had to do something with weather because you'll meet people who do not really work well without their weather background. I can't really do public relations. I can't, for whatever, do, I don't know, real estate. But the point being is that there are jobs outside of broadcasting. I found that with the energy companies, that as they trade on energy futures, that there is a berth there, which I've kind of slipped into the past 8 years and done pretty well with. It's a good, exciting career, provided the market will support it. Right now, there's a little bit of a depression for natural gas and oil, and for that seems to be working out. So I'm just telling like Kit, who are studying meteorology somewhere, that there is potential for you in the future. You just have to kind of wait and see the lay of the land on how the job industry is going. And for me, it was a case where I knew that TV wasn't permanent. It really isn't for anyone, but with me when I was in my early 50s, I decided, look, I need to find something to earn a living because TV wouldn't go on forever outside the occasional spot with Fox or whatever that people might have seen. So I moved to Houston, took a job with an energy trading firm, and now I consult several firms down here and also in Puerto Rico. So there's a niche there which I've kind of found and gravitated toward. But you know what? One of the big things I still love is engaging with people about the weather, telling them, and you'll see this on my Facebook page or on Twitter, it's just telling people their aspect of whether it be a storm or some extreme. I like to get into weather extremes a lot. I'm not a partly cloudy kind of guy. But the bottom line on this is that when you have an extreme like when we're confronted now, the talk about Godzilla El Nino, this is the time where our weather people should flourish and say, don't hype, give the facts, give the projections. Because a lot of times, you've seen this now, in the past month or two, there is nothing but hype and really the best path is to take a route in the what you expect, but don't go overboard and don't load it up with these cartoonish titles named Godzilla or Super El Nino.
That's right. I've heard Godzilla El Nino.
Sound fair?
I actually heard Chuck Norris El Nino. So, all kinds of crazy.
Yeah. The names are common in a way. It's okay when something's about to happen that you give it like a name just playfully. You might recall with the hurricane that hit the East Coast in 2012. You know what? People were calling that Frankenstorm, this and that storm. And the point was, it was just a hurricane that was turning into an extratropical feature. It was an exciting storm for sure, but it's easily explainable without the hype. And it's okay to give a name. I mean, I've been guilty of this in the past when something the day of the storm, or the day before it was going to hit, of giving it a name. I remember years ago there was an ice storm that hit a wide swath of the Midwest. I think it was 2001. And I called it the pulverizer or something like that. And, it was just goofing around. And that's okay. But don't be calling something this far out a term where if it doesn't pan out to be a big deal, could end up embarrassing meteorology. That was my big deal. I talked to a lot of veteran forecasters about this and said, you're giving a cartoon aura to meteorology, and we need people to be serious if serious or extreme weather.
Right. I remember a few years ago, there was a larger than normal snowstorm that was going to impact the East Coast, and a lot of the focus was on Washington, D.C., and they were giving the name of Snowmageddon. I've heard that one a lot after that. So,
Larry, we'll have to tell Larry your microphone is muted there. We'll have to get you to unmute that.
it'll be up in the top of the screen.
There you go.
How's that? Yeah, I just did it. Yeah. I don't know how it did that, but anyway. You probably missed the entire thing I said, right?
No, we heard right up until...
Probably didn't miss anything.
Well, let's talk a little bit about Danny and what your thinking is on that. And I know with the energy companies that you work with, that's something that they're watching with their refineries in the Gulf of Mexico. So talk to us a little bit about that. What do you think the projections are? Because some people are throwing the extreme out there, and some people are saying it's going to fizzle out. So what do you think about the environment, and what are your projections for the next week or so?
Yeah, I think the deal with this, energy companies, they want to know if it's going to get to two places. One is the Gulf of Mexico, where it could affect shutdowns of the energy bases there, the oil rigs and that nature, or They want to know if it's going to turn up the eastern seaboard, dump a lot of rain, bring a lot of wind, and shut power down. So there's two ways of looking at this. First of all, when I'm seeing the projections now, what I think of this basically is that I believe in the track through Guadalupe and then maybe to Hispaniola, be within 5, 6, maybe 7 days. Do I think it's going to become a major hurricane? There's already some dry air in train right now. It's dealing with that pretty well. But you know what? One Caribbean and near Hispaniola, two things are going to weaken it. There'll be a little bit of a shear element, not a lot. I think that's been overstated by a lot of sorts. But I would also say that with Hispaniola, it's a known enemy of hurricanes. So my thinking is this system gets to be a Cat 1, maybe a low-end Cat 2. It dumps a lot of rain on the Dominican Republic and Haiti, possibly Cuba. If it survives, it gets into the Gulf of Mexico and then steers westward from there. I'm not thinking this is a U.S. hurricane. Might be Mexico. We'll see if it survives. I don't think it'll be a big deal. It could be a big rainmaker, most likely for the Lesser Antilles, possibly Dominican Republic and or Haiti. And that would be, say, within 6 or 7 days.
And Larry, this is the first time. This is the first time that we've actually seen something develop this far out in the Atlantic for quite a while. What do you think as we go into the peak of hurricane season? What do you think the outlook is for the rest of August into September?
Okay, one thing to consider is that during fairly well-formed El Nino, and it will be pushing the westerlies aloft at low latitudes, probably by mid-September. I think we have maybe a month to play with where Cape Verde storms could get their act together. If I had to push a guess for named storms of the Cape Verde type after Danny, would they affect the U.S.? Maybe. There's bound to be some that recurve into the Atlantic Ocean. Consider, though, that almost all the model forecast CFS have an elongated ridge all the way from the Carolinas back down to me in Texas. That would tell me that any storm that does form in the Cape Verde area is likely going to go more west than it is north. Again, that probably will change. You'll see weaknesses in the ridge that these things will find. A couple may turn out to see, but my thinking is that after Danny, we'll be involved in land areas like the Greater Antilles, maybe the U.S., maybe Florida, more than likely Belize or Mexico. But I think that we're not done with Cape Verde after Danny. And I would furthermore say that if we get 7 named storms by mid-September, remember the call was for officially 7 named storms. My thinking is something like 12, 13, or 14 named storms. Now, it'll be a big deal, or there might be a major hurricane in there. But I think more and more that we will see a weakening in the El Nino signal by the first week of October. Only gradual. It's not going to go away overnight. It'll still be an El Nino as we approach winter. But, and with that in mind, there may be gaps in the western Atlantic basin that start to pop disturbances. Might be a diffuse frontal boundary. Might be an aged Tut signature. Who knows? But I think we're going to see 1 or 2 potential threats to the U.S. How strong they could be, Who knows? But I see the possibility there, and I see better chances for the Caribbean nations, rimming Greater and Lesser Antilles, Mexico, and Central America too.
That's some very good information that you're giving us. And this is kind of off topic of what we were supposed to be talking about tonight, but you live in the Houston area and you have entities in the Gulf of Mexico. You know, we haven't really seen any major landfalling hurricanes in quite a long time now. Do you believe the people along the Gulf Coast, over towards Houston, up the Carolina coastways, do you think they're kind of desensitized right now to what could be lurking out in the ocean, hurricane-wise? And do you think they're? I don't want to say they're not prepared, but do you think they're less prepared than what we have seen in previous years with hurricanes?
They're more relaxed now. I can tell you from living here. I was in the middle of Ike. Ike had at one point 120-mile-per-hour winds that went through Sugar Land, Texas. Most of the Houston metro got just 110. So they felt it. It was a big, big deal here. But what has happened subsequently, of course, weak systems. What really hurt, and I find this interesting, is that all the talk about, remember the Katrina year with Rita? Rita did a lot of damage to the psyche of Houston and East Texas in general. Yeah, it did a lot of Beaumont, Lake Charles and all that, but for Texas, people were evacuated, and for most, nothing happened. And this kind of rubbed people the wrong way, where they don't treat tropical systems as seriously anymore. Ike, they did do that because Ike did a lot of damage. Ike put this area, I would say, weak. Then things started to get back to normal. They've largely forgotten Ike now. You know, there are some storms, you living in the Carolinas, you know this. If you mention Hugo, people still remember Hugo. They might not remember Fran because Hugo nearly decapitated Charleston, Columbia, and Charlotte in one fell swoop. It was a big, big deal. It's a generational storm. Ike was kind of like a 10-year storm for people living in the Gulf Coast. I think with all this long time now, people are thinking, oh, it won't happen this year. It's an El Nino, blah, blah, and blah, blah. Truth of the matter is it could happen. And they need to be not desensitized. They need instead to be thinking we need to watch every little system that comes out of the Caribbean, far Atlantic, or Sargasso Sea. Because you know what? It only takes one. You remember year 92 to 93. That was a big, big deal.
Yeah, you're exactly right. It really does take one storm. And like you said, here in the Carolinas, and I know Kit can attest to it as well, people still bring up Hurricane Hugo all the time. I mean, just talking about it, you know, that's the one claim to fame here in the Carolinas with hurricanes. And you know, our eastern coast has been slammed with hurricanes out on the Outer Banks, but it always seems to come back and refocus on Hurricane Hugo.
And I mean, when I first moved to Belmont, it was all woods in the neighborhood around where our house was built at the time, and there were still trees down that were old. They were big trees, but they were old and rotting, and like we figured that they were probably brought down by Hugo some 20 years before then.
Driving around in '89 down there in the Carolinas, and I remember the damage was pretty substantial. And people had it on their mind because the next really happened, but everyone was watching tropics. And when you have a storm of that nature, and when it hits hard, it's going to leave not just a generation, but even the generation after that. I'll give you an example of this. When I was born a long time ago, 1954. We had a storm of memory that went from the Carolinas, Hurricane Hazel. It took down a tree in front of my house the week I was born. My father cursed that and said it was a sign from God that I would be getting into weather, and sure enough, I did. But the deal is that people were still talking about what happened with Hazel well into the time like when I was in college, 20, 25 years later. They still, a lot of older people remember it. The memory is there because it's a landmark storm that did so much damage, set so many records, you can't afford to forget it. Even Agnes, which was a big deal because it rained so much. It was funny because the week I graduated from high school, Agnes hit. I have a thing about me in bad weather, you know. And I remember, like, with some classmates, we were driving around after graduation looking at all this water everywhere. Everything was flooded. There was like 17 inches of rain in my hometown in Pennsylvania. Upstream in the Schuylkill River, in the Susquehanna River, there were some cases of 2 feet of water, and it all came running downstream. So you see, you got to watch with hurricanes because people remember the wind, remember the surge, but sometimes they don't remember the rain. The rain is as big of a deal, if not greater. What happened with that in North Carolina? It destroyed crops in the eastern half of the state. It kept raining and raining and raining. I forget what the actual total was. I know I lived in the New York area when it hit. We got about 10, 12 inches of rain from it in North Jersey. But the Carolinas, if I recall, you got like 19 or 20 inches of rain with strong winds. And that basically anywhere east of 95.
Yeah, I believe a lot of locations in the eastern part did pick up around 20 inches or so of rain. So a lot of people discredit that with landfall and tropical systems. And even, you know, that's the biggest effect, mainly with inland locations with hurricanes, is the flooding.
Yeah, another thing you have to remember is that as far as North Carolina and South Carolina concern factor going in the western, if you have an upslope flow and a strong enough disturbance that's involved with it, you're going to take a lot of moisture upslope and increase your rain. You have convection on top of upslope, then you've got real problems because in theory, you can end up with a rainstorm if it slows down where it'll pile up 2 feet or more of water. It's funny, in Houston lore, they still talk about Allison, but Allison's heavy rainfall bands, while they were incredible, 36 inches of rain in a couple of cases, those were limited to the downtown and north side of Houston. The metro area in general, they got heavy rain, of course, and they had flooding, but most of the reports were 9 to 15 inches of rain. The real big rainfall, the flooding in Houston at least, small area, and if people didn't see that, they don't really have a memory. They just remember, well, it was on TV, and we saw it on national news. Now, we got to watch out because one of these years, and probably sooner rather than later, we're going to have a weak to moderate La Nina. We're going to have 90-degree bathwater temperatures south of South Carolina and Georgia. And one of these storms is going to come up, and it's going to make a free run up 95 or up 81. That's going to be a problem people can't forget.
You're exactly right, Larry. Living here in the Western Carolinas, we always cringe when we see those hurricanes hit the Panhandle of Florida and then move up the 75 corridor up into Western North Carolina, Eastern Tennessee. Those always seem to give us the biggest rain producers. I remember back in 2004, we had two hurricanes that came through, Francis and Janine, and they dumped. I think both storms combined close to 18 to 19 inches of rain, and I mean, they're just locations that were just flooded out for a couple of weeks. They wasn't
Right.
able to get back into the homes and stuff. So those are definitely cringeworthy when they hit the Panhandle of Florida and come up the spine of the Appalachians here in Western North Carolina.
And
Yeah, there's two main tracks you got to walk in Carolinas, and that is one that comes up the Apps, or another one that comes inland around, Wilmington or Charleston, and then works northward.
Mm-hmm.
Because when they do that, inevitably you're cold front. And remember, the front, if it's there, in accordance with the upslope and the convection that I've talked about, you're going to further. And even people that don't get the rain as long, portions of the Carolinas are still going to get some very, very strong rainfall signatures from that.
That's true. All right. Well, let's kind of talk about La Nina and El Nino. I know our big talk right now in the weather world, at least, is the whatever you want to call it, El Nino, that's going to be affecting the United States here in the fall and winter season. And Larry, it's really hyped up on some places that you watch the news or get your weather information from. But talk to us about, first of all, we have a lot of teachers. I've actually had a few teachers message us. First of all, could you explain what El Nino and La Nina is, and then kind of talk about what its effects are with us here in the United States, and then maybe we can talk about the extremes of the weather that we'll see coming from it this upcoming year.
Right. First of all, you want to look at the entire spectrum of called the El Nino Southern Oscillation, ENSO, E-N-S-O. So when the teachers and the students, they should be thinking about El Nino versus La Nina, or four ways. An El Nino, a positive neutral, a negative neutral, and a La Nina. Now, if you're in an El Nino, it's telling you that sea surface in the equatorial Pacific Ocean are warmer than normal. And they should be at least a half a degree warmer than normal. Now, if you're going to have a strong El Nino, like we are possibly going to happen, you have to look at what's called the Oceanic Nino Index, or ONI, and there is a link you can go to on the Climate Prediction Center to find out what that number is doing. And you know what? If it is above 1.5 Celsius deviation from the normal water temperature in the equator, then you've got a strong El Nino. If you've got between 1 full degree and 1.5 degrees, it's a moderate El Nino. And if you've got between a half a degree and 1 full degree deviation above normal water temperature between the Galapagos Islands and the Philippines, you have a weak El Nino. That's the breakdown. 0 is neutral, 0.5 starts a weak, 1 degree deviation is a moderate, 1.5 or higher is a strong. Now, our projections for this system, this episode, some are saying it's going to be a strongest ever. Maybe yes. My reading is the 1.0. It's averaged, by the way, over 3 months' time. Or otherwise, you might have an overreaction in forecasting. Think about it. Sometimes water temperatures, like air temperatures, spike radically. You look at standard deviation. If that deviation is significant, that is 1.5 degrees, a lot, trust me, because it's an average. If you go 1.5 more, you've got a strong, in this case, El Nino, which is a cooler between the Galapagos. That's the chamber. We call them sectors: Sector 4, Sector 3, Sector 3.4, and 1.2. You look at the entire chain there to see how this is developing. Something we've seen this year, this is very critical, is that this wide El Nino that was stronger on the east end towards South America, now it is shifting its strongest signal to the center and western sectors. That is usually tied to strong winter charges in the Aleutian Islands or between the Aleutians and the Hawaiian Islands. Can be a Kona type low, i.e. Hawaii, but more often than not, it's a sub-Aleutian type vortex. If you get a vortex there, it pumps up a ridge along the west coast into the Yukon, Alaska, that general vicinity, maybe Northwest Territories. If you pump a ridge up that direction, you must change the wind downstream over inland North America and the east. Out of the north, that drains cold air. And if you do it just right with an El Nino subtraction, there's usually a southern storm track. If that is active with a cold fetch from the Arctic, you can get some dynamic coastal storms that, if it's cold enough, you'll get lots and lots of ice and snow, even as far south as South Carolina. And there is your lesson for El Nino in winter.
Well, very nice. One thing you did mention, though, was just the deviation from average of the sea surface temperatures. And you were saying just a deviation of 1 degree is a moderate El Nino events, but 1 degree doesn't seem like it's very much. So could you explain a little bit of why it's such a small number that affects it so drastically?
Now consider this now. You have a 1 degree deviation, plus or minus, that goes moderate La Nina. Why that's a big deal is because, remember, it's an average over 3 months. Now think about that, 3 months. If it's jumped a whole degree, that has a huge change because it implies in that whole degree that at some point there might be 3 or 4 degree spikes in certain areas. And it is that warm, and if there's energy being applied to a storm north of that warm surge, what could happen? You'll have a boost. You'll have increased precipitation rates. Your vertical velocities, your motion of the air is stronger, and ergo the storms will be stronger. Now, if you apply that whole degree over 3 months and hold it over, let's say, 6 months out of the year, where it's at that moderate level, you've got a huge input in temperature, which, because you've got the warmer waters, what will happen to the air temperature? It's going to warm as well. And that's why you're going to have big changes in your weather. Storms typically grab more energy. The storm track, the jet stream, is deviated south. And if you hit it just right, again, it's a very complex formula. Some people will tell you that a stronger El Nino, like a moderate one, always means it'll be mild in the U.S. Doesn't always work that way. 1957-58, which this is very comparable to, 65-66, and then a moderate El Nino of 2009-10, which may be greater in memory, 2002 and 3 also. Those had huge winter weather events. Even the infamous 82-83 season, one of the strongest El Ninos ever. Was there a big snowmaker along the East Coast? You betcha there was. Some people got 40 inches of snow. So it can happen. Sometimes you'll get cases where you'll have a stronger El Nino, and it will do that typical lip split, I call it, where the polar jet stream goes into Canada, blocks off your cold air, the southern jet stream comes up through the Gulf and up off the eastern seaboard. There's an active storm track there, but also what happens? The Arctic air is shut off and can't reach. So the only snow you're going to get will be in the south, and oftentimes it'll be elevation and nocturnal dependent. That is elevation, and it's got to occur at night for it to have any impacts.
Larry, you're talking about the temperature-wise. Something we've saw here in the United States the past couple of winters is big surges of cold air filtering into the United States, and I guess the last two winters, I know back last year in November we even had one of those Arctic outbreaks where here in the Carolinas, I can't remember, it was mid-November and we had a low temperature of 10 degrees. So we've had surges of Arctic air, and it's been overblown again by the polar vortex and all the big hype and fancy names, but we have had that insurgence of cold air. Do you foresee that being the case maybe again this winter as we head into fall and over the winter?
Okay, let me tread very carefully. I'm going to give you a little bit of a break where I think the winter is going. And I'm going to couch my words because, again, we are in August. It's much too early to give but I'll be a nice guy and answer your question best as I can. Because what I see is that this El Nino shaping up has its greatest similarities in the 1957-58 event. Now, it doesn't mean it's going to play out exactly like that, but one of the deals I'm figuring on is that we're going to have a fairly mild fall. Might be a surprise again in November, particularly if we get a typhoon out west which jumps in to the polar westerlies like we did last fall and help to build a ridge into western North America. That's why you got your record cold lows in the Carolinas. Will that happen again? Probably not, because that's an outlier. That really doesn't happen often. But I think my suspicion is that October, November, December probably won't be cold. I bet they'll be mild. But waiting for the other shoe to drop, my thinking is January, February, March, we fall into the same rut we did the past 2 years, where we found a collapse in temperature simply because two things were happening. One is we have a very strong Pacific decadal oscillation signal. It's positive. It's very warm water all the way from the Bering Strait down to the equator, joining the El Nino. And that usually implies that they'll be ridging along the west coast. Another thing, did anybody check out the Arctic oscillation in July and August? And what's forecast in August? It's been negative. We've had blocking signals by the North Pole, which have stemmed down toward North Canada, sometimes toward Labrador and Greenland. If this occurs, in 10 cases documented, WSI did this recently. Dr. Todd Crawford had done a little study on that. If that happens, if we have a negative Arctic oscillation blocking signal, also with a negative EPO or plus PNA blocking signal, that is close to the west coast, we're going to see it turn to cold weather in January and I think and March. After that, who knows? But that's the thought process right now. I'm thinking that could change. I'm not going to give my final say until around Halloween because the analogs might change. But I'm telling you, this is 1957, 58, 2009, 10 seemed to me to be the best analogs. I also used 2014 because of that huge plus PDO signature.
So possibly we could bring you back on towards the beginning of November and kind of give us a winter outlook as you see it.
Yeah, I'll be the one doing the hyping then, right? Yeah, I'll be glad to do that. My trick with this is that I was kind of offended by the way the El Niños. You've heard it too. The business as usual forecast. Oh, California is going to get mudslides. Everybody else is going to be mild and dry. Too early to say that.
Right.
Plus the fact that this El Nino had its roots earlier, and we even saw signs of warm buildups last fall. So all those models fall apart starting in the autumn. I kind of halfway believe that. All right? But also, the other flip, you've heard this too, the Godzilla, the Super El Nino. You know, what's next? You know, the King Kong El Nino? All that's ludicrous. It really, it wrecks one another. We need an educated public to handle extremes. If we have one group that says a mild winter and fall, and all of a sudden things change, people will be caught and it will not be good. You might recall that 2013 and 14, it seemed to me that myself and a couple of other meteorologists excluded were going for neutral. Neutrals are not a guarantee for a mild winter. We had we almost ran out of natural gas by April 1. Can't have that. You have to have a prepared, educated public, and you're not going to get there by telling people that Godzilla is coming. I mean, come on. It's stupid. You know? They might be saying, well, it's fun, and it is. Aware for what? That you're telling people in California that there might be floods when, with that big PDO signature, it kind of argues against it. Then you're telling people out east that, oh, it might be really mild and dry, but what about the negative Arctic oscillation correlation? There's a lot of technical stuff that goes on here, and I'm just saying, use your noggin on this one, people. Don't be going to extremes. Think about scenario A, scenario B, and you'll be prepared.
And that's why
blah, blah, blah.
No, that's why we brought you on tonight, because I follow you on Facebook, and you put it out there the way it is. There's no hype. It's all informative, and that's why we want to bring you on, because, you know, and I know that in the media business you have to get attention to get your story watched and to get commented on and stuff like that. But,
Right.
And it's kind of fighting that, because you do want people. But, again, when you hear Godzilla and all this kind of stuff on the national media, it kind of strikes fear into some people, and that's just simply not the case. You know, it may be a little bit higher than what we've normally seen, but it's nothing, seems to me, going to be really out of category that we've seen before.
Yeah, I don't buy the idea that it'll be a strong El Nino point now. 87 was that way. I'm trying to think elsewise. in 1957 as well. 97, so you got 3 there that are comparable, but 97 was a different animal in that while we had a positive PDO, Pacific, it wasn't the huge, you remember this term too, the blob.
Yeah.
This PDO signal goes all the way out to practice. It's serious, and it on its own, in conjunction with the El Nino, could do something really funky. But we're not going to get there if we tell people weird, bizarro names, or if we treat it like it's a comic book, or we paint extremes which might never happen. May well happen this winter, but we're too early to know for sure what they might be.
Now, one thing I would like to know is the potential impact of, like you were talking about it a little bit earlier, of the El Nino versus La Nina, but what would be the impact on the hurricane season this coming September versus next hurricane season with the El Nino event setting up right now?
Okay, now think about it this way. When you have an El Nino, any kind of El Nino, typically the Cape Verde hurricane season shuts down. It's only there for about August 15 to maybe September 15. And then it's kaput. Your tropical cyclones after that point tend to be at least reinvigorated in the Gulf of Mexico or the Sargasso Sea. And they may or may not impact. My thinking is we squeeze out maybe 3 more named storms before September 15. I have no idea, but I would caution that the Gulf is very warm. Southwestern North Atlantic is very warm. There's a big cold pool by the Flemish Cap and the Grand Banks, but for the Carolinas and Southeast purposes, I'd be more worried about the warmer anomaly between the Bahamas and North Carolina. That could mean something. So if for some reason that's generated by low latitude south and west flow aloft, which can be increasing, by the way, if it beats that, or if it develops off an old front, or from a descendant touch signature, a cold upper low that warms over and develops something in the middle of the night over the Gulf Stream, that can happen. Yeah, I think we might have about 6 or 7 of those, November 15 and, say, November 30. Usually we get one extraneous gale centers which might get a name like it's a tropical low. But if you take that away even, there's still potential for about 5 real tropical cyclones that could affect the Gulf Coast and the Southeast. But chances there, even with an El Nino. Now let's skip ahead. Let's say the models are correct, and they may not be. It may be neutral or something, but let's say they're at least neutral, maybe next fall. Typically what happens there, you get strong pronounced ridging across the south central and southeast. Storms in the Cape Verde area keep getting generated, but this time there's no shear. They go straight across, they develop, and if a weakness develops in that ridge, they'll turn north as a named storm. So if that happens, if we have a neutral year next year, or a La Nina, the 13 or 14 named storms I think we might get to cap off this season, we might get 4 or 5 more next season. Because remember, technology is figuring out what are named storms earlier in the game. And you've seen this with NOAA. So my point being is that we still could get more than a dozen named storms this season. We may well have next season if we are in a neutral or a La Nina signal.
I didn't realize my microphone was muted. Oh, Larry, we're closing in on the 9 o'clock hour. One thing that I would like maybe for us to discuss a little bit, something we haven't talked about, El Nino and La Nina, how it impacts is severe weather. We have the severe weather outbreaks over the Midwest and here in the Southeast. Talk to us about how that severe weather is impacted with El Nino and then La Nina.
Okay. Let me take you back to the 97-98 El Nino, which was a powerhouse. When that started to lift out, the jet stream that was associated with it, you had tremendous severe weather events in the South and even in the Mississippi River watershed. Typically with an El Nino, you'll have a delayed season, but an elongated and stronger season for severe weather. La Nina tends to be a classic severe season. That is, tornadoes are in the plains in the Ohio Valley a little earlier, like in March to April. But the point I'm making is that both El Nino and La Nina have their own quirks. And if we do indeed have a well-developed El Nino that's spring, we probably would see a fairly active severe weather season in the Mid-South. That would mean your Huntsville, your Atlanta, your Charlotte, your Nashville, even up to Louisville. That ballpark there would have to be in the lookout for greater risk for severe weather. But again, we'll see. We have to see where they take us with this event.
Well, I feel like this has been a very informative talk, and you've shed light on so many situations, and we appreciate you coming on. As we close in on the 9 o'clock hour, I know you've been up for quite a long time, so we won't keep you much past 9. I know Joey, who is Joey's normally on our show, but he was not able to make it tonight, and he always asks a final question, and so Kit's going to ask that, and we'll kind of wrap up from here, so we can close off at a decent time so you can get you some rest.
All right,
okay.
So what Joey usually asks all of our guests is, usually we have some younger student viewers on either live or on the podcast. So we usually ask our guests, what advice you would give to someone such as a young high school student, say, who's wanting to go into meteorology, and just some advice for them and their future.
Okay. One thing I always stress is that you have to stick with this. You know what scares people away from studying meteorology? It's not the math. It's not the physics. Sometimes it's the computer science. Trust me, that gets in the way sometimes.
Yeah.
Because more and more employers these days want programmers with or without meteorology background. But no, let's talk about this here. If you are a student who wants to go into meteorology, here's what I tell you to do. If you're in high school, do as best as you can with the math. Take your calculus, do really well in trig and calc if you can. It's also important to take an earth science and do well at it. Never assume that you know more than the next person. Because you know why I say this? You're going to need, in this keen age for scholarships, to get the best average you can in school you can. And what I'm telling you is that what I did when I was your age, to sound really old geezerish, Sunday through Thursday, I started studying right after dinner at 6:30. I didn't quit till 10:30. I got ahead of myself. I studied with weather, but I also studied my math. I took Spanish in high school. I wanted to be good in that because I reasoned that some time in my life I might need it for business or for education. and I've been right given where I live in Texas now. When you're planning for college you want to go to, make sure you can hack it financially. You have some scholarship, or you have at least some financial pile or resource to draw from, because college is expensive. I always recommend to people, this is something different. If you're going to college, go as possible. Because you know why? You need to find new friends. You need to seek new challenges. Why do you think I went to Kansas? I'm from Pennsylvania. You know why I wanted to go there? 2 reasons. 1, because it was something new, and 2, because tornadoes. I saw my first tornado in Kansas, not first tornado ever, but my first real on-ground large wedge tornado, April 6, 1907, Kansas. Me and my friends watched it from the roof of the building where there was geography, geology, and meteorology. It's a big, big deal to pick the right school and to stick at it and do the best you can. And once you finish, not to get disheartened because you're applying and you don't find a job. Trust me, it takes a long time, but if you're vigorous enough and you push the matter and you show people that you love weather and you have a specialty too, that's important. Some of you might like snow, some might like hurricanes, some might like floods for all I know. Have a specialty, seize it, and run with it. That's Larry's advice for your college career.
Well, I think that's some really good advice coming from your perspective. So thank you for that.
Thank you. Thanks, kid.
And Larry, we'll kind of wrap up. I loved our discussion we had before the show was coming on. We were talking a little bit about meteorology, and my final question for you is, and again, totally off topic of what tonight's topic was, but what do you think the future of meteorology looks like 5 years, 10 years down the road? What do you foresee the weather enterprise? What directions do you think we'll be going into next?
Okay, first of all, I think meteorology will survive what I call the programming era. As I've indicated, a lot of firms these days, like computer programmers, they think that they can handle weather just as well. I always tell people this, that numerical data is the wave of the future in meteorology, but it is not the present. I think when you cut away all the stuff about computers and about this equation, that equation, you know what wins the day? Good forecasting, good knowledge of weather history, and I spend 4 or 5 hours of my day researching weather topics. An employer might tell me, well, I need this or that, but it's most important for you to know weather history to weather present to you, is that know climatology, and don't be afraid to forecast weather outside the numerical realm. Because remember, the humans are more superior than the one in the computer.
Very, very good information there. Well, Larry, we appreciate you coming on tonight. I'll give you the opportunity to promote your Twitter and Facebook and website and all that good stuff. How our viewers can get in touch with you.
Sure. Just the best way, seriously, is to see me on Facebook, or it's Larry Cosgrove, or on Twitter, it's Larry LinkedIn. And again, if all that fails, you just want to write me an email, larry.cosgrove@gmail.com. I keep it simple. I have no funky names outside of WX America for my business, but that's how you can get me, larry.cosgrove@gmail.com. God bless everybody, okay?
Thank you, Larry. We appreciate you being on, and I think we're going to have you back on. I don't know about Kid, but this is I enjoy doing this show every Tuesday or Wednesday night, and you by far have been one of my favorite guests. Just giving it a real perspective, and you're just giving true answers. And I've really enjoyed it, and I hope that you'll join us again some night.
Well, sure. Maybe we'll do something around the Halloween with the winter forecast.
Definitely, we'll do that.
We'll get people watching.
We will.
Okay.
We'll do it. We'll definitely set up and have a great evening and get you some rest.
Thanks a lot now, guys. Take care.
Thank you, Larry.
Bye-bye.
Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
All right, guys. Well, I hope you enjoyed our show tonight. Larry, very great interview there with Larry. Very super awesome guy and very knowledgeable. And I've learned a lot. I've took a lot of notes. So it's been a great show, and I'm very appreciative of Larry coming on.
Yeah, I think it was a really great show. Definitely with all of his inputs on the sort of the hype of the El Nino event that the media is giving it, but also the reality of like past events like one in the 80s and 97, and even the early 2000s, which I had forgotten about. I think he said 2002, 2003 season. So just hearing his input on how those seasons set up and comparing them to this one is really good to see.
It was, and like you said, Kid, we really don't honestly know what's going to happen with El Nino. It's not played out yet. It's kind of a prediction, so it's going to be interesting to watch it. And he was very weary of hyping it up to be a bigger event because, quite frankly, it could not turn out to be as hyped up or anticipated as a lot of forecasters have said.
One thing I'm going to be looking at is just the overall data from the Pacific Ocean, like seeing the temperature spikes if they are going way up, like he was saying, which would average out to just the half a degree or single degree above the average over 3 months.
Yeah, definitely something to look into. So looking forward. I guess we're going to have Larry back on maybe the end of October, beginning of November, and kind of have him come on and talk about the overall winter and what he thinks will happen. And just from talking to him tonight, I can't wait to have that show on because, as you can see, and it's those who are watching can see, he's really done his research.
Yeah, I'd almost like to have him on for another third show to recap the El Nino event, just sort of debrief it and see what did happen, what didn't happen. If it's going to do a repeat next year, just see where everything goes from here.
Definitely, just kind of pick his brain and get some knowledge. He just knows a lot about everything, so that's some good stuff there. Well, next week we'll be back on our regular night, Wednesday night. We're going to have Nate Johnson on from WRAL, as well as Chris Michaels from WCYB. They're going to be recapping the AMS meetings that took place in the month of June and July in Raleigh. Kind of give us some up-to-date information about what took place there. And then for September the 2nd, the new GOES-R radar, or GOES-R satellite, is being launched soon. We're going to kind of recap that with Rob Eichler and Tony Rice, as well as I've been in contact with the NOAA, National Oceanic Atmospheric Association, and we may be getting their main satellite guy on the show. So he and I have been talking back and forth on email, so hopefully we can get him on. And let me get his name because I feel bad for not calling him by name. It is, John Leslie. There it is, John Leslie. So John Leslie with NOAA, he will hopefully be joining us as well. And then after that, we're going to be talking about another big thing that's of hot topic here in the Carolinas, and that's the danger zone, the radar coverage for western and central North Carolina. That is going to be a hot topic as it goes before the North Carolina House and Senate to kind of get a new radar posted somewhere here in the western to central North Carolina area. Brad Panovich and Steve Udelson will be joining us, and hopefully we're going to be trying to work with one of our state senators or House of Representative people to kind of come on and talk to us about that. So a couple of big weeks planned for the Carolinas Weather Group, and we hope that you'll be joining us then. Kit, anything to add as we kind of log off here?
None that come to mind right now. As far as just recent weather, the Belmont Ridge, what I like to call the reason why we don't get as much rain as the rest of the county here in Gaston County. The Belmont Ridge finally broke last weekend. We got 3/4 of an inch of rain, which has been much needed since total month of June. We might have gotten an inch and a half total, or sorry, month of July. So that was much welcomed rain.
It's been dry. The drought monitor updated last Thursday still continued Gaston, Lincoln, Cleveland, parts of Catawba and Burke, and I think Rutherford in the severe droughts. So that's going to be continuing, it looks like, because what we thought was going to be a rainy couple of days here yesterday, today, hasn't really panned out. We've had some rain showers, but not like what we had thought. So we'll have to see if that changes tonight into tomorrow. Trying to think. We'll keep our eye on Danny, and we're going to wish you and Cody good luck as you start back to school next week.
Well, thank you. But there is a little bit of change in that non-wet pattern. Right now there's a flash flood watch out for, it looks like just Union County around Weddington, Indian Trail, and Monroe area. So parts of central North Carolina are getting some good rain right now.
There we go. Well, at least someone's winning on the rain lottos, so looking forward to that. Well, we appreciate you guys watching tonight, the Carolinas Weather Group, a special Tuesday night edition. So we will see you next Wednesday night with Nate Johnson and Chris Michaels. We're going to be talking about the AMS meetings that took place in the month of June and July, kind of the summer recap. And hopefully by then we'll have an idea of what Tropical Storm Danny will be up to by then. It may be kind of close to somewhere here in the United States, so we'll have to watch that as well. So thank you for joining us. Make sure you download the podcast and download our other podcasts. Go give Larry Cosgrove a shout-out on Twitter and thank him for coming on tonight. For Kit Collinger, I'm Scotty Powell at the Carolinas Weather Group, and we'll see you next week.
Bicycle.